Is UKIP a comfortable home for libertarians? Question mark. It's my sincere belief that that question mark isn't needed, quite obviously, and hopefully I will try and persuade some of you. Might have a bit of a tough job based on that show of hands, but I'll try and persuade some of you that that indeed you can feel comfortable inside UKIP. I think there's some misconceptions, some valid, some not, so we'll see how we get on. First of all, I think I'll get the first bit out of the way, which is if you took the policies of UKIP and analysed them one by one and tried to come to a conclusion as to whether UKIP is or isn't a libertarian party, would you be able to say objectively that UKIP is? The answer, I think, is no. But, for example, UKIP supports an income tax. We support immigration controls. We support universal health care, education, and however you cut it, those require redistribution and so on. But just because we're not necessarily a purist libertarian party doesn't mean that we're not the most libertarian leaning of major parties, and it doesn't also mean that as a libertarian you shouldn't feel at home inside the party. So that's the first bit to get out of the way. So now we can look in a number of aspects to see how the party stacks up from a libertarian perspective. The first thing to point out is that UKIP is a party. We're not an idea. So as fascinating and as invigorating as libertarian philosophy is to all of us, ideas are totally inert unless they're translated into political action of some kind. And that's a real bummer, because that bit, translating it into political action, is bloody hard work. It's not an easy thing to do. And so that requires organisation, it requires a structure, it requires a number of things, which we'll come on to. If you look at the policies, policies are one thing of a party. I mean, there's a number of aspects to it. Policies, obviously, are what you stand for, and those have to be a blend between what is your belief and what is your principle, and that which is realistic. Whether you like it or not, our electoral system means that in order to bring about change, for certain, the only certain way to bring about change is either to win enough votes to replace the people sitting on the green benches in the House of Commons, or to win enough votes in order to scare them enough that forces them to change their position. That latter one is not really preferable, and the former takes a hell of a lot of work. But those are the only guaranteed ways. You can go and form a pressure group, and you may be able to pick up on one particular issue that has resonance among the British public, and generally that may be where the government has totally underestimated the strength of feeling on a particular issue, or there's an unintended consequence of something they're proposing, and you may find that you can get them to change position. But it's by no means guaranteed, and if you're going to do it, it's only going to be on a very specific issue in a very narrow area where you may be able to bring about change. But if you have a broader platform, if you are standing for something that is more of a cultural change, which is about getting the state out of people's lives, that sort of thing is not really possible to do as a pressure group. You have to have teeth, and the only way of doing that really is through a political party. And under our system, you've got to win votes, and winning votes means you have to have a platform that is compelling to enough people in order to get you somewhere, and that is not easy. So that's the first point to make. We are a party, as much as we, some of us in the party are libertarians, some of us in the party are not, but many of us are, especially among the younger members. Although we may be, you've actually got to achieve something, otherwise there's no point. So that's the first point. Coming on, before we come to policies, which I'll look at in a second, the other aspect is it's important for voters to know, when they go into the polling booth, most people, when they vote, the party they vote for, they want to see in government. So if you vote Tory, you want to see a Tory government. If you vote Labour, Labour government. If you're a UKIP voter, you probably want to see a UKIP government, and so on. So standing on one issue is not enough. You have to have a broad platform, because when people go and vote, all the time government continues to be involved in things like education and healthcare and all this stuff. That's what they care about. And so unless you're talking to them on those things, they're not interested. basically. So they want to know what a party stands for. Where are you coming from? Where are your roots? What's your hinterland? When they vote for you, how are you going to react to an issue that may come along in a few months' time or a few years' time? What is your instinct going to be? And we as a party recently adopted a new constitution. Previously, we described ourselves as a libertarian, non-sectarian, non-racist political party, blah, blah, blah. But we've just got a new constitution, which was passed by 92% vote of the members. And in it, I'm going to refer to it so I don't actually get it wrong, but we'll see what you make of it. Where are we? So, the party is a democratic libertarian party and will espouse policies which promote and encourage those who aspire to improve their personal situation and those who seek to be self-reliant, whilst providing protection for those genuinely in need, favour the ability of individuals to make decisions in respect of themselves, seek to diminish the role of the state, lower the burden of taxation on individuals and businesses, ensure proper control over the United Kingdom's borders, strengthen and guarantee the essential traditional freedoms and liberties of all the people of the United Kingdom. Now, to me, that doesn't sound like a bad start as a statement of first principles. And that's what we've updated our constitution to be. All our policies have to be consistent with that and with all those aims. But we sort of drew a line in the sand, adopted a new constitution. Who are we? What do we stand for? Which direction do we want to be going? And that's the direction that we've sort of pegged in the ground. So now, if we take a quick tour of some of our policies, I mentioned earlier some of the things that we support, but if you look at, for example, education, okay, yes, we support universal education, but we support liberating schools to run their own affairs, to compete against one another within a voucher system. So it's perhaps not the most perfect libertarian solution, but it's fairly Milton Friedmanite, and it's better than what's there at the moment. Similarly, if you look at other areas, we were fairly early to support a flat tax. Okay, it's still a tax, and it's still still an income tax, but having a tax that is transparent and is understandable, and which is harder for politicians to meddle with, is undoubtedly a good starting point in order to get somewhere closer to where we want to be. In terms of democracy, we've long supported, as you may know, referendums and direct democracy. Now that has issues because, as we all know, tyranny of the majority is in its purest form. However, if it's done in a correct manner, if it's constrained to those issues that necessarily have to be decided in a public sphere, then it is a tool to empower people over bureaucracy, and that in itself is not necessarily a bad thing or against libertarian values. But as I say, there are some issues around it. So we have policies which to certain degrees are more libertarian leaning than parties in power, albeit they're more fairly mainstream and still maintain a flavour of mainstream. At the last general election, we stood on a platform where we detailed spending cuts that we would make, totalling just over £77 billion a year, and we actually listed the government agencies and programmes that would be scrapped in order to achieve it. And because we did that, it actually doesn't overlap to a great degree with the cuts that the current government, are not making, but you know what I mean. So, okay, 77 billion, you could say that's roughly 10% of government spending. It's not really a radical libertarian manifesto. Well, it's still 10% of government spending. It's still a hell of a lot more than was on the table from anyone else, and it still involves actually scrapping swathes of government programmes rather than chipping away at budgets or freezing them in real terms or whatever clever games politicians want to play with figures. So, the intent is there. The intent is to reduce the state. The intent is to reduce taxation, get government out of people's lives, and so on. And that's important because among our membership, which really, if you're looking at a party, you want to know what do the members think. What is the activists of the engine of the party? What are their views? What are their values? How closely aligned are they? And as a party, traditionally, we have been a mix of people. Our party chairman's an ex-Liberal Democrat, Nigel's an ex-Thatcherite Conservative, I've even met some ex-Green Party members in UKIP, which I still don't quite understand, but anyway. So we have a mix of people. We've pulled them from across the political spectrum, partly because we started off as being about one issue in particular, or certainly known for being about one issue in particular, and so anyone who was concerned came across. But as we grow, people who find that they don't really fit in with the UKIP model tend to leave. And what we're finding, especially among younger members, is a pretty solid, libertarian-minded type of person being attracted to the party. And as that happens more and more, obviously, hopefully the party will move increasingly in that direction. We have some policies that are perhaps not perceived as libertarian. Immigration controls, the so-called and ill-conceived burqa ban, the perhaps now on gay marriage, and I'm sure you can think of others. Well, I'm not going to touch on those now, because I'm sure we'll probably come to them in the Q&A, but what I would say is that in a lot of those cases, the underlying complexities of that are such that they're not necessarily as illiberal as they may first appear. So if we want to go into details on those, we can, but obviously people have issues with some things we stand for. So I would say that we are a political party. We have to engage in politics. We have to win votes. Winning votes is not easy. Convincing people to defect from other parties is hard work, because people tend to vote tribally to a certain degree. It takes a lot of time to build up brand awareness, recognition and trust and loyalty, and to create our own habitual UKIP voters. It takes a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of energy, and you have to have a package. And that package is not just about policies, but you have to have people who can communicate it. And I would argue that, well, certainly Nigel Farage is pretty good at doing that at the moment. You have to have an organisation structure that can go out and fight elections, and that means branches and members, and you have to retain those members. And it means that you've got to have, yes, policies that are grounded in principle, and that you can say that you're moving in a particular direction, but it's an overall package. And when you look at what's on offer, I would say that, okay, we don't necessarily have perfect policies, we don't necessarily have perfect people, our party structure could certainly be improved, and our organisational skills. But when you look at the package, and you look at the parties on offer, I think what you see in UKIP is a party that is certainly now, I think, transitioning to become a permanent fixture as a fourth party on the British political scene. No progress is linear, we zigzag across to get to where we're going. But I think we're transitioning to that point at the current time. I don't think UKIP's going to disappear. I think people now vote for us because of other issues. And we have people who tell me, certainly at the last general election I noticed it for the first time, saying they were going to vote because of our education policy or because of our policy on the environment. That they were voting for us for reasons other than the European Union. And that is a fundamental change that's happened in the last couple of years that never used to be the case. And so, as we make that transition, I think there's a very strong opportunity for UKIP to actually stake out the ground that is, if not libertarian, certainly more classical liberal, leaning in that direction, diminishing the role of the state, lowering taxes, letting people be free to get on with their lives, run their businesses, look after their families, all of these things, and get government out of their lives. And if there's a party that's doing that, and is not just saying it, but actually out there achieving it, engaged in debate, stealing votes from other parties, and by God are the other parties actually now scared by the votes we take from them, and it's not just Conservatives, Labour also are starting to pick up on the fact that we steal votes from them. When we do that, then we start to have some teeth and start to make an impact. So I would say, yeah, we're not perfect. Yes, we've got a long way to go. I think the number of young libertarians joining us is extremely encouraging. But I would say that as a package, at the moment, we're certainly better than the old failed three parties. I think we're going to be a permanent fixture. But the aspects that you may think are not libertarian, I'm sure we'll touch on in the Q&A. So I want to leave as much time for that as possible. So I'll stop there. Thank you very much for having me, and please be nice.